If you're trying to learn more about Fujifilm's film simulations and you've been wondering about the differences between classic Chrome and classic Neg, you're not alone. This question actually came into my blog last year from one of our readers asking, what are the key differences between classic Chrome and classic Neg? So that's what we're going to explore in this video. If you want to learn more about all of the other film simulations, I do have a free course that covers all of those that you can check out at photocourses.link/filmsims. And if you ever have any other questions that you'd like to have answered on the channel here, please let me know and I'll consider doing that video. So classic Chrome and classic Neg, they both have the word classic in the name, but unlike a lot of the other Fujifilm film simulations, these two do not correspond to specific Fujifilm film stocks like Provia and Velvia. There was no classic Neg film or classic Chrome film. Classic Chrome was first introduced in Fujifilm cameras in 2014, while classic Neg didn't appear until 5 years later with the release of the X Pro 3 in 2019. So we're going to look at some image comparisons here. We're going to look at how the color and the tone changes between these two film simulations. And at first glance, it's pretty obvious that both of these film simulations do have a lot of contrast and they have different color shifts. Classic Chrome is much more desaturated than classic Neg, but not globally. Blues do retain some vibrance, so they are a little bit more saturated than the other colors, and the hue is also shifted towards cyan, again, in those blues. These characteristics kind of give it that nostalgic chrome look and overall cooler characteristics. And almost the opposite happens in classic Neg. Classic Neg generally has a more saturated look, but the cooler colors, the blues and the greens, those are desaturated more than the reds and the oranges. And this lends to more of a warmer characteristic. You'll notice that the highlights are also shifted in that warmer direction. And then as we look at the contrast between these two film simulations, we can see that they both do have a lot more contrast. But the tonal regions where these two film simulations have that stronger contrast are different. While classic Chrome has a strong contrast in the shadows and more neutral contrast in the highlights, classic Neg has very strong highlight contrast. It also has a different tone curve response in the shadows based on the color. So you could have some shadow areas where you do have those really dark blacks, and then other shadow areas where the shadows are lifted. And that's all simply based on the color. So it really makes it a lot more difficult to predict how classic Neg is going to respond to any particular situation. There are a lot of subtleties and nuances when comparing these two film simulations. If you took one scene and compared classic Chrome to classic Neg, you may notice a very strong difference between the two images in both color and contrast. But then in other scenes, depending on the colors and the tonality that are present in that scene, you may be hard pressed to notice those differences at all. So that's why I think it's more important to dwell less on the technical absolutes of each one of these film simulations. Don't care so much about how does the tone curve respond or how does the hue, saturation, and luminance of reds, how do those shift between the two? I think that's less important than the more subjective comparisons between classic Chrome and classic Neg. And what I'm talking about there is how they can make your photo feel and how those two film simulations can contribute to the story that you're trying to tell. Because even though those differences may be subtle in some situations, the two film simulations tell a very different story. So here are some photos of the Manzanar internment camp in California, processed with both classic Neg and classic Chrome. Now this was a hot summer day when I was there for these photos. And classic Neg kind of gives off that feeling of a hot summer day because those highlights are brighter and generally the photo is shifted over more towards the warmer colors. Warmer colors are also generally associated with happiness and more of an uplifting mood, but this was a concentration camp. Now, it's not officially called a concentration camp, but by every definition, it was a concentration camp. So, is that the feeling that I want to have for this story? What about classic Chrome? Classic Chrome is going to desaturate those colors, and that is going to help us focus more on the content within the photo itself, the story that we're telling, because we don't have those colors telling us that we should be happy and upbeat and warm. So that's why classic Chrome may be a better choice for this story in particular. Now, if it were just a regular scene out in the desert, then we might want to choose classic Neg instead of classic Chrome because of those brighter highlights and warmer colors. We can take this photo right here. This is Provia, and this was a very cold January day of diving. So if we take this photo and we process it in classic Neg, again, we get those warmer tones, those brighter highlights, and it just kind of has a warmer feeling to it. But it was a really cold day, so maybe classic Chrome is the better film simulation to choose to give that feeling of that cold day, to tell that story. Portraits on a bright sunny day. Classic Chrome looks really good from a documentary type standpoint for this photo, but if I want to give it that warm, upbeat feeling, I'm going to choose classic Neg. In a photo like this, both film simulations work perfectly well. They are both well suited to this photo. The question is, though, as far as which film simulation you're going to choose, what is the story that I am telling? What's the feeling that I want to give? Do I want to give more of a documentary type feeling, or do I want to give more of a warm, happy, upbeat feeling? That is your decision point when choosing between classic Chrome and classic Neg. So I hope this comparison helped you learn more about the differences between classic Chrome and classic Neg. We saw how the colors shift between the two and how the contrast is different between the two. But I think the key, what's more important is, and this applies to all Fujifilm film simulations, what is the story that I am trying to tell? What is the feeling that I am trying to convey with my photos? Again, if you want to learn more about all of those film simulations, check out that free course at photocourses.link/filmsims. Please leave any other questions or comments below. Subscribe for more great tips like this every week, and we'll see you in the next video.